The Clippers traded for James Harden late night. They tried to do this as late as possible at night when the most possible people were asleep because they were embarrassed by this trade, and they should be because they're the Clippers. They haven't made the finals ever in the history of the franchise, dating back to Buffalo in 1970, talking 5.5 decades of bad luck, terrible injuries, mismanagement. We had the Donald Sterling piece of it. We had load management the last couple of years. They've had some of the worst playoff losses of the 21st century. And now they're trading for a guy who's quit on his last 3 teams. So they decided, you know what? We'll do this in the middle of the night on the East Coast at least. So we'll take the least amount of slack. They were bidding against nobody. There's 30 teams in the league. One of them had James Harden. 28 other teams were like, we're good. And the Clippers said, you know what? We need this guy. We'll still be not nearly as good as Denver, but if we do this, maybe we could lose in either round 2 or round 3, maybe. I just feel like they don't have any draft picks left for the rest of the decade. So they basically traded 3 picks for James Harden. The worst one was a 2028 unprotected first. They also traded a 2026 first that they get a worse first back. I didn't really understand that one. And then they have a pick swap with Philly in 2029. Philly can just take their pick if it's worse. Why do this now? Why do this for a team with no other offers? Why bid against yourself? And why not just wait? If you know, like, you're trading basically 2.5 picks plus all these expirings they had, why not wait? The league, I don't know if you've watched it the first week, the league is more talented and more loaded than it's ever been, probably in 30 years. And there's a really, really, really good chance that a couple teams that thought they were going to be good are not going to be good. Like, for instance, Memphis is 0-4. Is Memphis going to go 25 and 57? Probably not. But there's going to be a couple teams that are just way worse than they expected. And guess what happens after Thanksgiving and in December and in January? Those teams panic. Guys become available. Like, what if Toronto is bad? What if they're like, you know what, Pascal Siakam, this just isn't working for us? What if Chicago, who's already had 2 team meetings, I think, in 3 games, what if they decide to put Zach LaVine on the table? Like, you just don't know. What you do know now is that there was only one team bidding for James Harden, and the Clippers ended up with him anyway. The other thing, if you're giving up this much for one guy, I better know that I have a chance to actually win the title, and I just don't feel like they do. I went to the game Sunday night. Kawhi, he looks fine. He looks fine. Does he look like the Kawhi from the mid-2010s? No. Does he look like the guy from 2019 Toronto? He does not. He looks like an older, playing himself back into shape version of Kawhi. And if that's your best player, that's just not going to be enough this year. The Celtics are too good. Denver is too good. Milwaukee has Giannis and Dame. Phoenix has a ton of scoring. Golden State's going to be really good. They're still not in the mix. So that was my first issue. The second one, who are you getting? Who are you getting in this trade? We're getting guys quit on 3 teams. You're getting the most disappointing playoff star this century. Literally this century. And there's no other person you can put in there. There's nobody who has even half of the qualifications from a playoff disappointment standpoint that this guy does. Zach Lowe came on the Book of Basketball podcast. I think in 2019, we did a James Harden podcast. And in that podcast, which was 4 years ago, called him the Karl Malone of guards. And I was immediately the most jealous I've ever been of a comparison. Since then, he had the 2020 bubble flame out. Then they had in 2022, the Miami series, which he sucked in. And then in 2023, the Celtics series. This guy, it's an all-time resume. And the Clippers, who are just playoff futility through and through for the entire franchise history, were like, that's the guy. That's the guy that can take the lovable loser Clippers over the top. James Harden. He slows you down. He needs the ball all the time. The Clippers now have Paul George, who succeeds the most when he has the ball. Kawhi Leonard, who has perennially succeeded the most when he has the ball. Russell Westbrook, who loves to either have the ball or crash the boards. And now Harden, who needs the ball. See, 4 guys who need the ball. Then Norm Powell comes in. He needs the ball. Bones Highland comes in. He needs the ball. Are we playing with 3 balls now? No, we're going to still play with 1. James Harden can't guard anybody. That seems relevant. He hasn't played defense in 4 years. There was an interesting, I've done 2 podcasts with Doc Rivers this year. One was right after the NBA Finals. And we talked about what happened with Harden and Philly. And Doc made this point that I thought was really interesting. I actually thought it'd be a bigger deal. He said, when Harden didn't make the All-Star team, he kind of changed how he played and started going for his stats a little bit more, was the implication. He was really unselfish up until the All-Star break. Then he didn't make the team. And then it just got a little rocky after that. The Sixers for the last 3/4 of the season, I think, were 46-19. So it's not like they were bad. But it was always a little tug of war with him after that. Because you want unselfish James Harden on a really good team. You want him just being like, I'll set everybody up. I'll actually play a little bit harder on defense. But we've only seen that guy intermittently. That's the guy he has to be on this Clippers team. At this age 34, going into a contract extension or whatever the hell is going to happen this summer, Ballmer's going to extend him. He won't be able to help himself. I'm just dubious that he's going to be like, I'm just here to help us win. We've only seen him do that for little spurts. Probably the most heroic version of that was 2021 with the Nets when they had those injuries and he was playing hurt. But I actually really like the way he played that year. For the most part, it is James Harden. The results are always disappointing with him and he's getting older. So congratulations on getting that. Third question for me, or third point, can you beat Denver or Boston with this team you have? I don't know if you watched Denver this year. They look amazing. Like, this is the classic, won a championship, kept the nucleus together. They're better than ever. They have the best player in the world. It's not even close. He's just awesome night after night. Everything he does permeates with this team in all the best possible ways. And you just can't tell me that Kawhi, Paul George, James Harden, PJ Tucker, Zubac, like they're not beating Denver. It's not happening. So if you're not beating Denver with the team you have, why are you making the trade in the first place? So they have Kawhi, Paul George, Harden, Mann, Terrence Mann, Norm Powell, Russ, Zubac, Plumlee, and Tucker, I guess would be their 9. I really liked how Westbrook was playing for them. Now, again, you're not going to win the title if he's prominently involved with your team. But now you're bringing Harden in. You kill Westbrook now. Like, he's coming off the bench. He's just not going to be the same. Now he's worried about how many minutes he's getting. He's going to want the ball. Like, you've killed that piece of it. So you've added Harden, but you've also probably killed the Westbrook part of your season. You're also not durable even before you got James Harden, who, God only knows if he's going to be able to stay healthy. Paul George's last 4 years, he missed 24 games, 18 games, 51 games, 26 games. Kawhi's last 6 years, 73, 22, 15, 20, 82, and 30 games missed. You have 4 older stars past their primes. Paul George, 33. Kawhi, 32. Harden, 34. Russell Westbrook, 35. Norm Powell, young legs at 30. All right, let's say this works. Let's say they actually all play really well together. What is, in the history of the NBA, have we seen a team with an older nucleus like this? And it is an old nucleus. Have we seen an older nucleus team actually win the title? Which I guess would be the point of this trade and all the other trades, because they've traded all of their firsts for an entire decade. Best comparison you might go to is the 2011 Mavs. Dirk was 32, Marion was 32, Jason Terry was 33, Jason Kidd was 37, and Tyson Chandler was 28. I don't see Dirk Nowitzki on this team, just for the record. I don't see 2011 Dirk Nowitzki. I think Kawhi, maybe a couple surgeries ago, but not this version of Kawhi, who's been under the knife a few times. But that would be your best case scenario. That team also won with defense, and they had one great scorer. This team is trying to win with offense and really no defense whatsoever. Good luck. Other teams, possibly, like the 1978 Washington team, they had Elvin Hayes, 32, Wes Unseld, 31, and Bobby Dandridge, 30, but that was in the 70s when those ages were old. They won the title. It was 45 years ago. The 95 Houston team had Hakeem and Clyde at age 32 each, but they were a little younger in different parts. But then if you're just looking at recent history of older teams that had just a nucleus of guys who were we could all agree, like past their primes, past their peaks. The 2012 Celtics, I think, are a good example. Like, they almost beat Miami, but when push came to shove, Miami just had players that were at better points of their careers. 2000s Utah, like right after they made the finals 2 years in a row, and then that 99, 2000, 2001, kind of the end of Malone and Stockton. They were in the mix, but they were just older. They weren't the same team. 2010 Phoenix, I think, is a really good comp for this. Nash, the last really great Nash season, the second to last really good Amari season. They're just kind of at the tail end of the rope. In general, you don't want to be from an age range where this team is, where you don't have like that one guy who we can count on for 4 straight playoff series. Maybe it's Paul George. He's also somebody who's had a lot of injuries. And by the way, I don't know when he's going to have the ball on this team. Paul George is probably my favorite all-around player on this team, and might have the 4th usage rate per minute of all of these dudes. Anyway, all right. 4th point I wanted to make: the Clippers, owned by Steve Ballmer, nice guy, been on this podcast, and spends money and assets like he's playing 2K. So Ballmer's basically traded all of their picks in the 2020s. It's, I think, 5 unprotected firsts, 3 swaps, and then there's one where they get the lower version of something. They just don't have their own good pick, except for 2030, which is 7 years from now. They traded Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Kind of a big deal. He's one of the 10 best guys in the league now. He was in the Kawhi trade. They didn't know he'd become this, but when you say they went all in, like they went all in ways that I don't know if any NBA team in the history of the league has gone all in. All the picks they gave up, trading SGA, trading Gallinari when he actually had value. From a luxury tax standpoint, they paid $89 million combined in 2022 and 2021. They paid $140 million in luxury tax last year. This is on top of their salary cap. This year, they're on pace for at least 128. So just the last 2 years, they're close to $270 million for luxury tax last year and this year. This is a team that might not make it out of round 1, for the record. Then you have the playoff resume of last year they lost in round 1. 2022, they missed the playoffs. 2021, they had a chance to make the finals, and Kawhi gets hurt again, and they lose in the Western Conference Finals. And then 2020, they lost in round 2. They were healthy, and they choked against Denver. They choked away a 3-1 lead. Everyone, including me, has been saying, well, they got to do something. They got the new arena coming. I don't know if this was the something. I think they feel like they need to do something because they have this new arena coming. But the problem is, no one cares about the Clippers in Los Angeles. They haven't forever. Forever. It's a Lakers town. It's a Dodgers town. It's a USC versus UCLA town. There's like a whiff of Kings. There's a whiff of Rams. They're kind of in that Kings-Rams. But even then, they probably don't have the same kind of diehard fans. They have this self-imposed pressure to matter because this town has such DNA with the Lakers and Dodgers and the college teams, but also it's a star-driven town. And the theory is, if we get stars, the people come out. So if you start with the COVID year, 2019-20, the year they got Kawhi and Paul George, they've had this kind of self-imposed pressure to stand out against the Lakers, which is fool's gold because they're the Lakers. They're always going to win in LA. It's the same thing the Nets did this in New York with competing against the Knicks. And even when they had Durant and Kyrie and they got Harden and Brooklyn seemed like a thing, people still cared more about the Knicks. You're just never going to win this. You can't beat 60, 70, 80 years of history. You can't beat generations of families that have had the ticket. You're just not winning that one. Now the Clippers feel like, well, we're going to have this new awesome basketball arena. Maybe that'll work. Trying to remember when an arena became the number one drawing point for a team. Maybe the Cowboys, but the Cowboys were also the Cowboys, the most famous football team we have. You could argue they were better off, instead of trading the rest of their assets for Harden, you could argue that they were better off maybe shopping Kawhi and Paul George and packing it in and trying to get into the luxury tax and do the whole thing. But they couldn't do that because Ballmer doesn't want to, because he's got, incredible amounts of money. And he's convinced himself that if he can put these 4 guys, all of whom are past their prime, on a team together, maybe they'll win the title. Well, spoiler alert, it's not going to happen. Last thing, Clippers with Harden is really peak Clipper. And, as I've talked about many times, I've had season tickets. This is my 20th year. I wrote a piece for Page 2 in 2009 called The Curse of the Clippers. And the point of that piece was Blake Griffin was talking about, this is a new era. I don't care what happened in the past. And basically like poo-pooed any sort of bad karma with the Clippers. And what happened? Blake Griffin hurt his knee that summer and didn't play his rookie year. And this was after I wrote the piece about, Blake, you got to be careful. You don't know what you're walking into here. This team has had a black cloud around it for the entire time it's existed. We thought it was Donald Sterling was the black cloud. And yet, when they finally got rid of him the next year, they had their worst playoff loss, not only in Clippers history, but it was probably the second worst playoff loss of this entire century behind the Spurs Heat game. They have had so many bad moments and so much bad luck that it weirdly comes back to Harden, because the worst of all those losses was Game 6, 2015 against Houston. Harden stinks in a must-win game. I mean, go figure. Goes to the bench. I'm at the game. He puts a towel over his head. The game's done. Clippers are up by 20 heading into the end of the third quarter. And Josh Smith, Corey Brewer, Trevor Ariza, like they're basically just jacking up threes to keep Houston in it. And what happens? They start coming back. The crowd gets tight. Josh Smith makes a three. Corey Brewer makes a three. All of a sudden they have energy. Now the towel is off Harden's head. They have the best comeback, or one of the best comebacks in Rockets history, and the worst comeback loss in Clippers history, with Harden mostly watching from the bench. So he is this bystander to this horrible, horrible event for the Clippers. And now they just traded for him. Now he's on their team. I don't agree with the trade. I don't think it will work. And I think James Harden has been telling us for the last 10 to 12 years who he is. I think Paul George and Kawhi Leonard physically have been telling us where their bodies are. And I don't see any chance that they beat Denver in a playoff series. You would have to have injuries in the Denver side for it to become realistic. So needless to say, thumbs down from me on the James Harden trade from a Clippers perspective.